So starting with the first one. So sir, first time in 2010 when BRIC expanded rather to include South Africa, it became BRICS. So do you think that with inclusion of another six members this time, there is a possibility of change in the name of the BRICS?
So basically, you are asking me a question that whether the addition of new members would consequently lead to the change of the name of the BRICS. Am I
Right,
correct?
right, sir, right, sir.
I see. See, uh, there are two kinds of forums, or you may call bodies. One are treaty bodies in international forum, and another are non-treaty bodies, volunteer group of association of
Right,
states. BRIC
right,
happens to be one of those, which is the second category. That means volunteer group of association.
right,
The first category, which is a treaty-based association of states, or which have a legal personality status, they are different, like WTO, United Nations, and all that. These are the treaty-based organizations, right? So BRIC is quite informal. BRIC
right,
was BRIC was an idea given in 2001 by Jim O'Neill, who was an expert economist at what you call Goldman Sachs. So he came up with the idea on the basis of his study of the growing economy of the time, that the future years or the coming years would belong to these six economies, those who are performing very well hitherto. And he called them BRICS because BRIC is an acronym of the Brazil, India, China, South Africa, and other countries, right? There are
right,
six countries in
right,
that. So later on, BRICS didn't perform as it should have or as it was anticipated, because some of the economies uh, couldn't live up to the expectation and they slowed down. But still, BRIC as an idea was lapped up by the countries whose name were mentioned in the BRICS. That means Brazil, Russia, China, India, and South Africa. They lapped it up. They said it's a good idea. So let's create a forum. Let's keep on meeting with each other. It also it was thought to be an alternative to the international economic order, which
right,
is spearheaded by what you call Bretton Woods institutions and WTO, right? So it was thought to be like it could provide an alternative to these institutions. Although, if you see the declaration issued by the BRICS nowadays, they put their weight behind these institutions. So they have absolutely no intention of creating an alternative institutions to the existing one, or like WTO or United Nations. So they want to be not supplementary, rather complementary to the existing multilateral treaty bodies such as WTO and United Nations Charter. For example, if you read the present Johannesburg Second Declaration, which was issued this year, they said that we want to strengthen United Nations. We support the amendment in the United Nations Charter so that the new member could be added into the Security Council. They also said that they want the rule-based international trade order, and for that
right,
matter, the WTO, they adhere to the WTO principles of non-discrimination, and also the principles of supporting the developing and the least developing economies. So basically, they didn't want to create an alternative to the existing international economic order or international legal order, both. Therefore, to suggest that they would like to change their name just because there is an addition of six new countries makes no sense. And it has been a practice all across the international organizations. For example, United Nations. United Nations, prior to the coming into force of the United Nations Charter, was the group of those countries which were fighting in Second World War, the Allied forces, right?
right,
So Allied forces were fought by United Nations. Later on, United Nations was also given the name to the institution which these United Nations, these states came along and then created, as it was called UNO initially, and then later on United Nations. So if you read even the United Nations Charter carefully, you will find the mentioning of the Axis countries like Germany and other countries which were the part of the Axis nations in those days. They are now the part of the United Nations Charter itself. So the United Nations fought against Japanese, fought against what do you call Italy, fought against Germans, but now all of them are the part of the United Nations, and the name was not changed, right? It
Right.
is still United Nation. All right.
Right.
Now, the second thing you will see that NATO. NATO is also a treaty-based organization. It keeps on increasing its profile. It's have been included. Still, it is called NATO, right? And NATO, if they want to add countries which are not falling within that territorial region, they call them NATO plus, but they don't change the name. So
Right.
BRICS will also not see any change of the name, irrespective of the fact that how many states or the nations keep on coming along with this institution.
Right, sir. This was indeed an insightful answer, considering the examples you gave perfectly fit into the situation. Moving on to the next question, sir. So BRICS is basically a grouping of some non-Western developing economies as of now. With the addition of six new members, is there a scope of de-dollarization or an emerging new BRICS currency? Also, the second part of this question is that how will India tackle the growing non-Western influence of the grouping, keeping in mind its ties with the US and its growing relations with the US?
So your ties, they say international relations is not a zero-sum game, right?
Right,
It's international. The beauty of international relation or foreign affairs, as it is called, is that the only thing foreign to the foreign affair is that those bodies with whom you interact. Everything else is internal. If you know what is your internal interest, that only you need to protect externally, and that's how you get along with the like-minded nations or the like-minded states, right? So if you are democracy, it doesn't make sense that you are trying to hobnob with the anti-democratic forces. The foreign affair is all about a country knowing its internal interest. And if you know your internal interest, you will have no problem in in transacting with the other states, right? So there are normally two kinds of transaction internationally. One is strategic, another is tactical, right?
right,
Tactical means it is temporary and transactional, right? So if you want to, for example, yesterday India basically closed the Afghanistan's embassy in India.
right,
Why? Because those who were working at the Afghan embassy in India were basically appointed by the Ghani government. Ghani's government may be the legitimate government or de jure government of the Afghanistan, although it's of course doubted, contested, but de facto it's the Taliban which is running the show in Afghanistan, right? So given that, you have to go by the realities of the situation, as we call the realpolitik. So realpolitik is that you have to transact with the Taliban. The Taliban cannot be your strategic ally for the purpose that they are inimical to the democratic political setup that we believe in. They are inimical to free society that we keep very close to our heart, and they are inimical to the causes which we champion, such as women empowerment, women freedom. So they cannot be that force which will be our strategic ally to propagate these principles, which is our core internal values, right? And we want to protect it. So another example of it, you see, when India was asked by the European forces that not to transact with Russia because of the Russian invasion of the United Nations of the Ukraine, which they said was the violation of the Article 2, Clause 4 of the UN Charter. So they said that please don't interact with Russia, because if you do, you would be violating the international law and all that. Although interestingly, they couldn't get one resolution from Security Council passed for a reason best known to everyone, Article 27 of the UN Charter, which provides for the voting mechanism of resolution to be passed by the Security Council. And then the voting mechanism is that there are two kinds of matters, or the characterization of the matters. One is the procedural matter, and there is the substantive matter. So in substantive matter, the voting requirement is P5 plus another 4 countries. As you know, altogether 15 countries are a member of Security Council, of which 5 are permanent and rest 10 are temporary, right? So if Security Council resolution was not there, why should we abide by the internal law of the United States of America, or even the European Union's resolution? Because European Union is an interesting situation. I don't consider European Union an international law per se. I consider European Union to be a federal law. It's, or if you want to go a step further, you can say it's a confederal law. But I would not qualify European Union laws as what you call international law. Different school of thought. Some people may argue that it is not exactly the case, but I would take it that, because Brussels have a parliament which has exclusive membership of the European countries. Turkey has not yet been made the part of the European Union, which says that they want to keep the European identity very very crucial for this purpose. So the bottom line is that the Brics states and the addition of the new state, or what you call the de-dollarization of the international economic trade, would be something that will depend on the scheme that they want to look into in light of their internal interest. And given that the Western hegemony has been quite unfair, quite partial when it comes to the international affairs. For example, for Canada, Khalistan separation is a freedom of speech and movement, but what you call invasion of Ukraine by Russia is not a freedom of speech and expression. NATO's expansion is valid cause, but India's territorial integrity, which is protected under Article 2 of the UN Charter, is not a valid cause. So if anyone says that we are ready to break India into pieces, is basically exercising freedom of speech and expression. There is no limit to the freedom of speech and expression. It fully includes use of criminal intimidation, use of violation, incitement, criminal act. Everything is included within the freedom of speech and expression when it comes to the Khalistan thing. But the same thing would not be extended to the protesters of the vaccine movement in Canada, because that is not the freedom of speech and expression. So this double standard has rattled the international community. And in international economic affairs, they have seen the dependence on the dollar cost them dearly. Although dollar is a bankable currency in the sense that it is internationally accepted, no such international currency has gained the reputation and the power as the dollar has. But it has also its flip side. And the flip side was that American has a huge advantage in the international trade, which is led by the dollar. So I don't think, to your question, that whether there will be alternative international currency of Brics, I don't see that way. There are a number of reasons that way. For example, in Brics, not every country or not all of them are of the same economic, economic development. China is excessively economically developed now, though it's basically developing, but when it comes to its manufacturing abilities, it is second to none in the world. India's manufacturing contribution to the international community is still very minimal. So if there is a Brics currency, and if India decides to do a trade between Brics currency between India and China, whether it will be accepted by the Chinese, because if Chinese want to sell it to Russia, does the Russia and China have the same amount of trade, export and import that they have with the India? So the thing that there might be congestion of a territory with one country which is exporting the most and other countries which are importing, they would be basically requiring it to give it to other countries. So de-dollarization would be an agenda of the because of the breaking the hegemony of the West, but coming up of their own territory, of their own currency, I think would be a problematic idea. But you never know, because even the bilateral currency trade is also a difficult issue. As you have seen recently, India and Russia has a big spat, whether because Russia said that if you want to pay us in rupees for the oil, discounted oil that we are giving you, the problem is that what will we do of these rupees, because there is no taker of the rupees in the other market,
Right.
because the rupees, they will be only able to trade with the rupees with a country which is looking forward to trade with India, so that it can give India that same rupees in lieu of certain goods and services, which is not going to happen, or which is not that case as of now. So bilateral currency trade also has its problem, but still it is functioning, and de-dollarization has already started. Not to every extent, because there are so many countries which still accepts dollar for the purpose of what do you call simplification of the trade and other issues. But yes, one of the agenda is, I think, unwritten, to de-dollarize it, to promote bilateral currency trade, and if possible, the evolution of ultimately a BRIC currency, at least for the BRIC nations.
So to supplement this, I like to say that there is definitely a scope for emerging BRICS currency, since all the 11 nations that will now be forming a part of BRICS, all of them are growing economies. They have a fair amount of market in their hands, and the other countries not a part of BRICS, not even wanting to, they'll have to accept the currency, since they'll have to sell their goods to the markets which have a fairly less developed population, I'll say, or less economically developed market space,
See,
I'll say.
let me give you an example. Let's say there
Right.
are four countries, right? Or five countries. Two of them are excessively industrialized, highly industrialized. They only export, okay? And what they import is food products, which is minimal. So they export $100 billion, but they import $5 billion, okay? So the trade deficit is $95 billion.
Right.
Now the thing is that these countries which needs to buy capital goods from this country needs the currency that this particular industrialized country is going to accept. Not everyone is at the same level. So let's say if you have a brick, see, Saudi Arabia is an oil producing company, it produces nothing else, right? Russia is basically military hardware and again, oil and gas, right? China, all the finished goods, right? India, some finished goods and services, basically software and all that, right? So if you will see the requirement of the BRIC currency, it will be difficult to rotate, because the need from one to one is not that much. One is exporting worth 95, but importing worth $5 billion. So how would you balance those currency requirements? So barter could also be one of the possible solution at the
Right.
moment. But yes, unless until there are other countries who are willing to accept even outside BRICS, if they are willing to accept outside BRICS, then why not to make them the part of the BRICS would also be the possibility. But it will
Right.
depend on the how many developed countries, how many other kind of countries are there.
So, basically, do you think that with this rapid expansion of members, there is a possibility of China assuming a superior position in the grouping? Uh, and so far, it has been a group of equals, but what do you think about the future of BRICS, including the 6 new members that will be added?
I mean, it's an interesting question. What do you mean by assuming a superior position? See, if you are because if you see all the BRICS declarations, they have reposed their faith in all the international legal order institutions that exist today. So how can China be superior? I mean, if China is playing by the rules, though, and if it has more what do you call points to score by playing within the rules, so be it. That's not assuming a superior position. But if you mean by the term assuming a superior position, that means it gets the hegemonic position. It can play, it can set it can simply bypass the rules or wouldn't adhere to the requirement of the international rule of law, then that will not be the superiority of the China. That will be rather stupidity of China, because then that will create quite of chaos in the countries.
Right.
Because the rules, what they do, as you know, in anywhere, rules basically made the facts predictable, right? There are no surprises. You know the possible outcomes, and that way there is a growing trust among the nations. If the rules are made what you call spontaneously, or rules basically what you call they come after the fact, then you will have a lot of problem, because you never know what transaction is a legitimate transaction and what transaction is not a legitimate transaction.
Right.
So no sane country would ever say that they don't support the rule of law based international legal order, be it municipal or be it international. So rule of law, as I told you, it will create, first of all, confidence building measures. Everyone knows what are the rules, therefore they will expect the outcomes based on their factual transactions. Everyone knows that everyone is going to be treated equally. There will not be mistrust, because if you do not know about a decision, or if you do not know about the role, you have a mistrust going on back in the back of your mind. You
Right.
start what you call doubting all the transaction, even though transaction may be beneficial to you, but because there is a great opaqueness in the system and it's not playing by the rules, you will have a doubts that will lead to the ultimately collapse of the system of the international cooperation. Everything which is played by rule, would ensure confidence building measure, would ensure non-biasness, ensure equal treatment, would ensure predictabilities of the laws, predictabilities of the factual transaction, would make negotiations easy among the states. So I don't see China assuming any superior positions. But by superior position, if they say that China's economy becomes 10 times the economy of India, so be it. But that because even if you read the Johannesburg II declaration, they have again said that they accept the sovereign equality of the state.
Right.
So I mean, if within the legitimate means, if you can negotiate hard, if you can bargain hard and extract benefits for yourself, so that's for you. For example, India is trying to negotiate hard with Canada nowadays by saying that yesterday India said that downsize your
Right,
what you
sir.
call diplomats from your embassies, because we
Right.
don't accept these many people in our embassy for doing very little work, because our trade is not that big in volume, in terms of volume. So that is legitimate action to do on behalf of India. So if China has acquired a bigger pie of the international economic order, and within that, if it plays by the rule and gets some leverages out of it, I think that's the collateral damage of the rule of law. But anything beyond and outside the international legal framework, or any action beyond the international legal framework, that kind of hegemony, if it is meant by China assuming a superior role, that will not be accepting. That will be the end of the China, because ultimately the entire Brics will collapse. Because
Right.
once the people of the states start distrusting each other, and then distrust grows, then there's a collapse of the function. So in order for Brics to survive, the kernel of this whole system would be the adherence and the absolute adherence to the rule of law, international
Right.
rule of law.
Right, sir. So moving to the fourth and the last question for this session. So, sir, BRICS accounts for basically 32% of the global GDP with 40% of the world population. While on the other hand, G7 makes up for 30% of the global GDP with approximately 10% of the world population. So, sir, do you think that the challenges between the two groupings will size up and one of them will lose its relevance in the near future, or both of them will be able to survive parallelly in their specific domains. So, sir, what are your views on the same?
I don't think there's adversarial position between these two statistics. G7, of course, is a Western civilization and the wealth of Western civilization. It wills 30% of the wealth of the world, but 10% of the population of the world. So it makes them richest. Because Brics, on the other hand, is 32% of the wealth of the world, but 40% of the world population. So it
Right,
doesn't put you, as far as the economic prosperity is concerned, at the same pedestal. But then again, there will be other factors. For example, purchasing power parity and other things. You can, inflate a little bit more as far as the volume of the economy is concerned of the G20. But G20 is more democratic. You see, even which is no more, by the way, G20 is a thing of past. It's basically G21 now, because in this Delhi Declaration, African Union's name was proposed by Prime Minister Modi, who was the head of the state for India, because India was the host state for
right,
the India was exercising its presidency this year. He proposed the name of the African Union, and the African Union was unanimously accepted to be the member of the G20. So it's G21. So
right,
it may be G21 because African Union itself will be having more than 15, 20 states within it. I don't know how many states in the African Union, but then that's because even in G20 you have EU also as one of the participant. So EU itself represents so many countries, right? So the bottom line is that there is no adversarial position in these two statistics.
right,
G20 ipso facto includes G7.
right,
G20 cannot be seen outside the realm of G7, because G20 is the extension of the G7. G7 countries realized that despite they representing a substantial chunk of the international economy, GDP of international economy, they still do not represent the massive population which is left outside the Western civilization or G7 countries. So
right,
it was their idea to expand G7. And to say that, because all the members of the G7 are ipso facto party of the G20 also. There's not a single G7. So the 32%, see, an interesting thing, Shreya, if you will just notice in this
right,
statistics, because
right,
G7, G20, G21 includes G7, no doubt about it, right?
right,
So
right,
if G7 is the 30% of the world economy, and G21 is the 32% of the world economy, or if you are G20 of that time, G20 is the 32% of the economy. That means the another 11 countries only add up to 2% of the world economy, whereas they contribute 30% of the world population.
right, sir.
So so to say that G7 is in an adversarial or in any kind of conflicting position, I think wouldn't be the right analysis.
Right,
Basically, these data or these statistics are of the current nature. But the idea of expansion of G20 was to keep the mind in the future growth. So this data would be incorrect as when it comes to the shape of G20 10 years down the line. Because when India will be the top third economy, India itself will be around $12 trillion to $15 trillion economy. China will be sitting around 18, $20 trillion. America will be perhaps 20, 21, or maybe less than China. So the India, China will be, and America would be, they themselves, if we take 15 each, around a $60 trillion economy. That will be a lot of wealth of the world. So these statistics will change. But at the present time, if you analyze this statistics, that G20 basically includes G7, and G7 is 30% of the wealth, G20 is 32%. That means the other 11% countries only contribute to the 2% of the increase in the existing wealth of the
right,
G7.
sir.
But it includes or it adds 30% of the world population, perhaps. I mean, that was the reason that more people will be represented, and then if more people will be represented, you can make a better decisions, which will impact the lives of the many individuals across the length and breadth of the globe or across the globe. So the idea was that since these 7 countries would be deciding the fate of the many countries which will not be the part of that system, so they said expand it so that we can take a better decisions, and we can make an effective contribution to the economic prosperity of the world, and what do you call, bringing prosperity to the different section of the population of the world also. So that's how it should be
Right.
seen. It should not be seen us versus them kind of equation, and it is not, because G20 is merely an extension of G7.
True. Right, sir. So, sir, this brings us to the end of the questionnaire, and I got phenomenal answers with phenomenal examples, and they fit in perfectly.